All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going deep into Canadian firearms licensing,
Oh, yeah.
unpacking what it actually takes to get a possession and acquisition license.
You need a PL.
Exactly, a PO.
Right.
We've got two sources to help us navigate this whole thing. The official RCMP website and this handy guide from the BC Firearms Academy.
That's comprehensive.
It is, and this is one of those topics that always seems to spark debate.
For sure.
But today, we're sticking to the facts.
Just the facts.
What does it actually take, legally, to own a firearm in Canada? No opinions, just the process.
It's good.
Right off the bat, I'm curious,
Yeah.
who can even apply for a PL? Like, who's eligible?
Well, the RCMP website has some pretty specific requirements.
Okay.
First off, you got to be a Canadian resident.
Makes sense.
But here's something that caught my eye. You can apply when you're just 12 years old.
12 years old.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I guess it makes sense if you've got families who want to go hunting together.
Right.
But 12 seems pretty young to be handling firearms,
Definitely. And the RCMP does require parental or guardian involvement for anyone under 18.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it does raise some questions, right, about the safety training for applicants that young.
For sure. Speaking of applying, is it true that if you've ever held any type of firearms license before, you can't apply online?
You can't.
That seems a bit strict.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The RCMP website says that the online system
Yeah.
is specifically for people who've never had a license before.
Ah,
So if you've had one, even years ago, you've got to apply by mail.
interesting.
Maybe they have a whole other set of checks for those folks.
That makes you wonder what those checks might be, right?
Yeah.
But let's move on for now. Let's talk about the application process.
Okay.
Both sources really emphasize safety courses. Like, it's the foundation
It is.
of the whole thing.
Totally.
So break it down for us. What's involved?
The Canadian Firearms Safety Course, the CFSC, it's a non-negotiable if you want that PL.
way around.
Nope. It covers all the basics. Safety rules, storage, handling, transportation, even how to operate non-restricted firearms.
And the BC Firearms Academy guide, they really stress choosing a reputable provider for this training, right?
They do.
Like, it's not just about checking a box. It's
Aye.
about actually understanding the responsibility that comes with owning a firearm.
Absolutely.
Now, what about restricted firearms? Like, if someone wants to own a handgun.
Then there's another course.
Oh, there is.
The Canadian Restricted Firearms Safety Course.
So you're telling me if I want a handgun in Canada, even more training.
You got it. It's called the CRFSC.
Okay.
And BC Firearms Academy, they suggest taking it back-to-back with the CFSC.
Smart.
Definitely the most efficient way to do it.
Makes sense.
Mm.
So we've got the safety courses down.
Right.
What about actually submitting the application?
Right.
We know there's the online option and then there's the mail-in option.
Mm-hmm.
What are the main differences there?
Well, BC Firearms Academy gives a really clear breakdown of that online process. You head to the RCMP's online portal, fill out the application, upload your proof that you completed the safety course.
Your CFSC certificate.
That's the one.
Got it.
And then you just submit it all,
Okay.
along with your ID and payment.
That sounds pretty straightforward.
It does, especially compared to filling out paper forms and mailing everything.
I can only imagine. But for those folks who can't apply online,
Yeah,
the RCMP website has that downloadable application form.
it does.
Not as user-friendly, I'm guessing.
Maybe not, but it gets the job done.
It's there if you need it.
Exactly.
I did notice on the RCMP website that they mention
What's that?
things can get a bit more complex depending on the applicant's situation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like their specific circumstances.
It can.
Okay, can you give us some examples?
Sure. Let's say you live in Quebec and you want to get a restricted or prohibited firearm.
Mm-hmm.
You'll need an extra form
Oh, really?
from the Sûreté du Québec.
What is that?
That's the provincial police force in Quebec.
Okay.
And if you haven't been living in Canada for at least 5 years,
Okay.
you might need to get a letter of good conduct from the country you lived in before.
Interesting.
A lot of hoops to jump through.
It is. What about references?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
They require references.
They do, including contact info for any current or former conjugal partners.
Wow, really? If applicable, I'm assuming.
Of course. But still, it makes you wonder why they're so thorough about that, doesn't it?
It really does.
Seems like they're trying to get a really complete picture of the applicant.
From all angles.
Yeah, multiple perspectives.
Okay, so it's not just conjugal partners.
Nope.
They need email addresses for 2 references in general.
They do.
It's serious business.
It is.
But I did notice it's a bit different for minors.
Oh, how so?
They just have to provide their parent or guardian's email,
Ah, that makes sense.
given the parental involvement. Anyway,
Right.
it's all pretty interesting, I gotta say. I was also intrigued by how they adapt the application process for different groups.
Like,
Well, for Indigenous peoples applying under the Aboriginal Peoples of Canada adaptations regulations,
okay.
that's a mouthful.
It is.
They have to involve an elder, leader, or adult from their community.
Right.
And they even have a process for people who need a photo waiver.
A photo waiver.
Yeah, for religious reasons.
Interesting. It seems like they've really tried to think of everything.
They have. Be inclusive of different needs and circumstances.
Pretty impressive, really.
It is. It gives you a sense of the depth and complexity of this whole application process.
Yeah, it's definitely not as simple as people might think.
Not at all. But let's say you've made it through all that.
Right.
You've got your PL in hand.
You're good to go.
Not so fast. What does having that PL actually allow you to do?
Well, it lets you legally purchase, own, and use non-restricted firearms.
Okay.
And if you've also done the CRFSC, then you can apply for a restricted PL.
Which opens up more options.
Exactly. Handguns and other restricted firearms.
So it's not just one license covers everything.
No. There are different levels of access depending on what you want to own.
And the training you've completed,
Of course.
it's all about safety and responsibility at every stage.
That's the key takeaway.
It sounds like a journey.
It is.
And we've only just begun. We've covered a lot of ground in this part of the deep dive.
We have.
But there's still much more to explore.
There is, and it's going to get even more interesting.
Oh, I can't wait. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve into what happens after you get that PL.
The rules of the road
Exactly.
for owning a firearm in Canada. Welcome back to our deep dive into Canadian firearms licensing.
In part 1, we tackled those eligibility requirements
We did.
and all the safety courses you need
Oh.
before you even think about applying for a PL.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It is.
Laying the groundwork.
Exactly. But getting that PLL,
Yeah.
it's just step 1.
It is like getting your driver's license.
Okay.
You're allowed to drive,
Right.
but there are rules of the road
Of course.
you absolutely have to follow.
So what are the rules of the road for owning a firearm in Canada?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that there are different classifications of firearms.
Okay.
We're talking non-restricted, restricted, and prohibited.
All right, break this down for us a bit more.
Sure. Non-restricted firearms are usually your long guns,
Okay.
things like rifles and shotguns
Mm-hmm.
that people use for, hunting or sport shooting.
Makes sense.
And then you've got restricted firearms.
Right.
Those include handguns and some semi-automatic firearms.
Okay.
And then finally, there are prohibited firearms,
Prohibited, okay.
which are, well, as the name suggests, completely off limits.
So no fully automatic weapons for us?
Nope.
Sawed-off shotguns, things like that?
Those fall right into that prohibited category.
Better.
And even with restricted firearms,
Yeah.
there are much stricter rules
Okay.
for storage, transportation, use.
So let's talk about storage then.
Okay.
Both of our sources, they really hammer home safe storage practices.
That's so important.
So
The
important.
RCMP website is very clear. Firearms have to be stored unloaded, trigger lock, and they need to be kept in a locked container or room that meets certain security standards.
Serious security.
Oh, yeah.
And the BC Firearms Academy Guide, they make a really great point.
What's that?
They say safe storage isn't just about protecting your firearms. It's
Yeah.
about protecting your loved ones and your community.
It is.
It's a responsibility that goes beyond just the gun owner.
Couldn't agree more. They also talk about the legal consequences
Oh, right.
of improper storage.
Like what? What kind of consequences?
Well, we could be talking about hefty fines,
Oh, wow.
license revocation, even criminal charges.
That's serious stuff.
It is.
Okay, so we've covered storage.
Mhm.
What about transporting firearms?
Another big one.
What are the rules if you need to move them from one place to another?
Again, safety and security are key. For non-restricted firearms,
Mm-hmm.
they have to be unloaded.
Okay.
But for restricted firearms,
Yeah.
you need additional authorization.
Really?
And you can only transport them directly to and from authorized locations.
So like a gun range.
Exactly. Or a gunsmith.
Okay, so no swinging by the grocery store
Right.
with your handgun
Definitely not.
on the way to the range.
Nope. And remember, those are just the federal regulations.
Right, yeah.
Provinces and territories can have their own rules on top of those.
So always check with your local authorities.
Always.
This is a lot to keep track of.
It is.
Any other key regulations we should be aware of?
Well, there are also rules regarding how you can actually use your firearms.
Okay.
Basically, it boils down to lawful purposes only.
Like what?
Hunting, target shooting, and in some cases, self-defense.
I'm assuming using a firearm under the influence is a big no-no.
Absolutely.
Alcohol or drugs, I'm guessing.
100%. Okay.
Anything else?
It's also good to know that there might be local bylaws
Oh, right.
that restrict firearm use in certain areas.
So you've got federal regulations,
Yeah.
provincial or territorial rules,
Mhm.
and then local bylaws on top of that.
It can be a lot.
It seems like owning a firearm in Canada
Yeah,
comes with a whole lot of responsibility
it does.
and paperwork.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart.
Not at all. But that's why all that emphasis on training and education is so important.
It is. It is. The system's designed to make sure that anyone who owns a firearm understands the rules and takes those responsibilities seriously.
They're trying to strike that balance, aren't they?
They are.
Between allowing people to own firearms
Yes.
while also ensuring that it's done safely and responsibly.
Exactly. And I think that's a good segue into the next part of our deep dive,
All right.
where we explore some of the broader
Okay.
social and political debates.
Oh, this is where it gets interesting. It's going to be a little heated.
Perhaps. But we'll navigate those waters carefully.
Of course.
We promise to present a balanced view
Of course.
of all the different perspectives at play.
So buckle up for part 3, where we unpack the often contentious world of gun control and its impact on Canadian society. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Canadian firearms licensing.
We've covered a lot, haven't we?
We have, from the nitty-gritty of applying for that PL to the rules around storage and transportation and use.
A lot of details.
But now it's time to step outside all that technical stuff
Right.
and look at something a bit more complex.
Okay.
The social and political landscape surrounding firearms in Canada.
This is where things can get a little tricky.
They can, can't they?
It's a topic that sparks passionate debates, strong opinions on all sides.
And it's easy to get caught up in the emotions of it all, right?
It is.
But our goal here isn't to take sides
No.
or push any particular agenda.
We're just here to give a balanced overview of all the different perspectives.
Right, so our listener can form their own informed opinions.
Exactly.
So where do we even begin? This is such a multifaceted issue.
Well, one of the central tensions in this whole debate
Okay.
is the balance between individual rights and public safety.
Right. You've got people who really believe in that right to own firearms,
They do.
citing self-defense,
Oh, hard.
hunting traditions, sport shooting as their reasons.
And they argue that, responsible gun owners
Yeah.
shouldn't be penalized for the actions of a few criminals.
They also worry that stricter gun control could infringe on the rights of law-abiding citizens.
Absolutely.
Right, right.
And then on the other side, you have those who really advocate for stricter gun control
Okay.
as a way to, reduce gun violence and keep communities safe.
Makes sense.
They point to the statistics,
On.
gun-related homicides,
Okay.
suicides, accidents,
Mm-hmm.
as evidence that, we need stricter regulations.
So things like,
Bans on certain types of firearms, stricter background checks, mandatory safety training.
we've talked about some of that.
You have, haven't we? It's important to remember that public opinion on gun control in Canada,
Yeah,
it's diverse and it's nuanced.
it is.
Polls have shown that support for certain gun control measures can really vary.
Depending on.
Region, age, political affiliation.
It's not a black and white issue.
It's not. And then you have the cultural significance of firearms in Canada.
Oh, right.
For
Right.
many people in rural communities, firearms are just, a part of their life.
For hunting, pest control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even as a symbol of their connection to the land.
And in some Indigenous communities, hunting with firearms is a really important part of their traditional practices and their food security.
So we have to acknowledge these perspectives
Yeah, we do.
when we talk about this issue.
Respect them.
Absolutely. And it's also important to recognize
What's that?
that the gun control debate often gets mixed up with political ideologies.
It does, doesn't it?
Different political parties taking different stances, some pushing for tighter restrictions, others emphasizing those individual rights.
Makes it difficult to even talk about sometimes.
It does. That politicization makes it really hard to have, constructive conversations.
Right, and find some common ground.
People talking past each other instead of really engaging with how complex this issue is.
I think that's a good point.
It is. It shows how much we need respectful dialogue,
Yeah.
even when we disagree.
Especially when we disagree.
Right.
So where does all of this leave us?
Wow.
We've gone through the whole process of getting a firearms license in Canada, learned about all the responsibilities of ownership,
Yeah.
and dipped our toes into this complex world of social and political currents around this issue.
I think the takeaway is that There are no easy answers here.
No easy answers.
It's not a simple topic. It needs careful consideration,
It does.
critical thinking,
Yeah.
a willingness to engage with different viewpoints.
Absolutely. And this conversation, it's ongoing, isn't it?
It is.
It'll keep evolving as Canadian society grapples with these really fundamental questions.
About safety, rights, and culture.
Well said. We hope this deep dive has given you a solid foundation for understanding the world of Canadian firearms licensing.
It is a complex world.
It is. We encourage you to keep exploring this topic, asking questions, forming your own informed opinions.
Stay curious.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious and keep digging deeper.